Hello everyone, welcome to the Red Room. Today we will do a bit of shameless self-promotion. Maybe some of you can guess from my Art Deco backgrounds. We will be covering today Orpheum Lofts, the first book of the Giallo trilogy.
Not entirely shameless, I hope. I'm expecting this to be useful for someone who's planning on running Orpheum Lofts. So what is Orpheum Lofts and what is Postmortem Giallo? I'm showing the cover here. Okay, Postmortem Giallo. Why Postmortem? Because it was published by Postmortem Studios. And why Giallo? Giallo means yellow in Italian. And it was originally a collection of books, of murder mystery books by English and American writers like Edgar Allan Poe and Agatha Christie, that was translated to Italian and published as cheap paper cover books. And the covers were yellow, and they looked like this, or this looked like those covers, because it was made to look like them. Okay.
Yes.
This little red thing here and the yellow cover. Hence Giallo. But the Giallo are also something else, and that's what influenced these scenarios. They were movies, thriller movies, produced by Italian and Spanish studios.
Mostly Italians, right?
Yeah, mostly Italians.
Yeah.
During the late 60s and the early 70s, and they prolonged into the 80s and 90s, and there are even more recent movies that are also called Giallo, even though that subgenre lost some of its edge along the way. Yes?
Yes, the Giallo, I'm thinking that the Giallo movie from
Argento?
Dario Argento, that is one of the most recent, right? That is called
Yeah.
Giallo, is a little bit less Giallo than the ones he did way back. But it's interesting how, sorry, let me say that, a book, a type of editing a book just became a genre. A cinema genre and a literary genre.
It's mostly the name that was used. So,
Yes.
well, you probably already have seen some Giallo movies, even though you don't know the name. If you don't know the name, but any movie by, well, not all movies by Dario Argento. Some of them are horror, but several are, for example, Deep Red, which is a classic of Giallo, is a popular movie. Okay, now enough about Giallo. I will be doing a video about those movies in a while, because, well, they influence 3 of my scenarios, and there's some other things that we should like to have about
and there's a little bit more, there's a little bit of it in the other scenarios too, in your other work. It's not so obvious, but the influences are there.
Yes, even though I'm not a Giallo expert, I've always liked horror, but Giallo is just a subgenre. But when I was writing the scenarios, I had to watch a lot of movies. So besides influencing these ones, they influence me also, because I liked a lot of them. A lot of them I didn't ever saw it, and well, they are a nice genre, and nowadays there's nothing like that. Horror has become less edgy. So as I was telling, but if you don't want to wait for the video about Giallo, I will be posting in this video a free scenario I put on my blog a while ago, that is meant to be played with, or not necessarily with, Orpheum Lofts. You can play it by itself, and it has an introduction about Giallo. It explains some of the movie tropes, and there's some suggestions of movies, Giallo movies, and you can try it, and if you like it, you can play Orpheum Lofts.
And it's very Giallo.
Yeah,
That
that's
one,
very
it's
Giallo.
very Giallo. That one shot was made to play like a Giallo.
So, well, if you want to try it, you can download it from the link I'll put in the description. Okay, now about the 2 modes in which you can play Orpheum Lofts. one of them I've already covered now. It's the Giallo way. It's to be played in a one shot because, well, maybe a two shot, two game sessions, unless you have more time and you can do a long session. You can.
Yes, it's hard. It's always like that with horror, in my opinion. But with this case, it's hard to play it as a campaign. You'll have to play it very slowly.
Yeah, the problem
it can
is
become tiresome.
usually there's one murder, and when you find the murder, the story is over.
Yes, exactly.
So that's not, you can prolong it, of course, but not for a campaign. It's a very small a series of adventures, perhaps 3 maximum. I can see it played more than that.
I think we played the ones we played, we never went over 2 sessions.
No, I don't
right?
think so.
It was always 1 or 2.
1 or 2. It's the ideal for this, I think. So if you are playing this as a Giallo, which is the first thing it is meant to be, I suggest you take a look at the background, and then you pick one of the main cast, one character for each player, or the secondary cast if you prefer, but ignore the long descriptions. Just give them a small description of the character, because it's meant to be played quickly, and you don't need the web of relationships that are detailed here. That's meant for the second mode of play. The second mode of play, which I'll now talk about, can also be influenced by Giallo, of course. It can be played partly as a Giallo, but not just as a Giallo, because if you can have a killer, maybe 2 killers, but then you'll have to have something else. The second mode is based, strangely as it may seem, on soap operas and sitcoms of the 80s and 90s.
Friends, for instance.
Yeah, Friends, for instance.
I get a kick out of that.
Friends, Seinfeld, Mad About You, Sex and the City, why not? Well, several, except the humor, forget the humor. It isn't supposed to be very humorous. I just suggest this because it should be played around a group of friends. So why this? Well, because at the time, I was playing, the first time I played this scenario, it was a scenario written for Cult, the game. It was a horror scenario, not entirely Giallo, partly Giallo, as I was saying now. And one of the players wasn't really a horror fan, but he was a Friends fan. So I made up this.
That was very smart. You're like, oh no, we are not playing a horror game.
Well,
we're playing Friends.
He knew it was horror, but I said, okay, this has some elements from Friends and from Sex and the City, so you'll enjoy it. And well, I don't remember if we enjoyed it, but we tried. So I decided to keep that because I think it's a nice way to have a group of characters who live in the same building or not necessarily in the same neighborhood. And then there's a lot of things that are in their web of relationships, and then it can generate a lot of stories.
I like the way you describe that at the beginning, the first time I read it, it was a bit confusing, I will admit, but the way how each character because the first time I read it, I didn't know about the other characters, right? I haven't read it, the other characters. That's why it was a bit strange. But then I really liked it. So you know how every character reacts to the other characters.
And that information can be shared with the other players, no problem. You can just...
Yes, it's not a secret, right?
No, there are some secrets, but not very important secrets, so they can be shared. Okay, so let's take a look at the PDF. So this is a cover. I have to say that this, even though I like all the covers, this is perhaps not the best one because it's not entirely, well, it's a generic cover for Giallo. I mean the illustration, of course.
Yes.
It's not really appropriate for this scenario because it's about the lofts, and there's no loft here.
Yeah, there's a woman running in the woods.
Yeah, yes. I think Jim shows it because it has a pulp feeling to it, and
it's very pulp.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about, well, you have an introduction and talking about Giallos and all that, what I was saying before. So the lofts are a building in New York. I placed it in New York because because so
It was
no
the
reason.
90s and you had Sex in the City, Friends,
Yeah,
Seinfeld, they all take place in New York.
of course, being a giallo, it could be placed in Rome probably, but not necessarily. A lot of the giallos were also set in the US and England, in partly because some of those movies were starred by
Yes.
foreigners from
We'll,
an Italian
we will
perspective.
go over the craziness that
Yeah.
is with the subtitles and everything in the sub when we talk about the giallos.
Oh yeah. So, but just one thing about the title. The free scenario as a giallo title. Her
Oh
heart
yes.
was a locked room and nobody had the key. It's a very long and strange title because that's the way giallos are titled. Orpheum Lofts is not a giallo title.
Yes.
Okay, so Orpheum Lofts. It was a building, an Art Deco building from the 20s. It was initially meant for upper middle class, very luxurious, very beautiful. But time wasn't kind on the building, and it is now not derelict, but well, it shows the years. Um,
Now it's a hole.
yes, it is inhabited by some old people that have been living there since the 60s or even before, and some younger people who probably are the players, the player characters, and they don't have much money, so they are living there because, well, it's the rents are cheaper than
So
other
there are
places.
always things happening, like the elevator stops working, right? It's one of those old elevators, very
Yeah,
European, I would say. The electricity stops working in the basement. Do you want to talk about the basement? I'll leave the basement to you.
yeah. The basement is flooded. There's a this is let's now talk about another inspiration, the trilogy of the three mothers from Argento. One of the movies, which is Inferno, as a flooded basement too. So it's meant to be the supernatural part, if you want to place it there. There's supposed to be a supernatural entity in the basement, which has some objectives. Uh, they aren't explained because this is the way I write scenarios. I usually add, there's a place, there's a cast, and there's ideas. And then it's people call it a, how's it, situational sandbox. Situational sandbox because there are situations and you play it like a sandbox, not with encounters with the creatures, but with the people and the events. So
It's a David Lynch style. Sorry. So
yeah.
you the blue the blue box is a box, or maybe not.
So then the building belongs to a guy called Paul Abramovitz, who is very cheap and he doesn't want to pay for the very necessary range, the how do you call it?
To take care of the building,
Yeah, remodeling,
repairing and remodeling.
repairing and remodeling. It's very old and it needs paint and all that. And the janitor is a creepy guy who doesn't like to work that much.
And he's a bit off.
Yeah.
He's very off.
So for weirdness happening, for weirdness events, you have here a table you can and different villains. If you would like to do things randomly. Now let's talk a little bit about the main cast. As I told before, there are usually 2 pages or maybe 2 or 3 pages for each character.
Yes, and one will be just for the relationships.
Yeah, that's it. This one here. So the first one details the background of the character and as a physical description. And then you have character relationships. This is what this character thinks and how she acts towards the other characters in the main group, which is a group of friends.
The friends.
Yeah, the friends. They aren't all friends among each other. There are some rivalries and there are some relationships that are closer than friendship. But well, okay, mostly they are friends. So there's Julia, Julia is a small town girl who came to New York to be an actress, but she didn't succeed that much. So that's why she had a romance with a director who kicked her out of his house, and she ended up living in the Orpheum Lofts.
She's very naive and a
Yeah.
bit stupid and blonde.
And she's and she's living in the same apartment as Monica Ashton Green, who I will describe later. There's George Wesley. George Wesley is a strange guy. He usually doesn't shave, doesn't bathe. He's too worried about an obsession he has. He's obsessed with amusement parks, old amusement parks in Coney Island. He was years ago. He was an accountant, I think,
for an important firm, right?
Yeah.
But then he
got obsessed
gave up.
to, I think his grandfather worked in a
Do you remember how you
carnival.
get that idea? Because that's a really strange. That's a really. It's fun. It's interesting, but it's a really strange obsession.
That's something to do with cult. I'm not sure anymore, but it has something to do with cult. So it's supposed to be, well, it's supposed to be supernatural, and I'm not going into that because it's a game master thing. So if you want to, if you are going to be a game master, you should read it. But if you're a player, it's probably not that useful. Then there's Tracy Cates. Tracy Cates was George's former girlfriend. She is an anthropologist, and she's into S&M and bondage.
But that's just for her thesis.
Not quite.
That's the excuse.
That's how it started. Tracy doesn't live in the block in the same building, but she lives in the neighborhood, and she usually goes there. She still interacts with some of the friends in the group, though she ended a relationship with George. Then there's Monica. We have already mentioned.
Well,
Monica
I like
is,
Monica.
Yeah, Monica is fun. Monica is a call girl, and she's tougher than her friend Julia. If you are playing a Giallo, Julia will probably be the victim. Monica can be the victim, but she will play a tougher victim.
Yes, she can be the heroine, the one that survives.
She's a tough girl. Now you have Ron Taylor. Ron Taylor is he was an athlete, but then he had some kind of a accident, and his career ended soon. And then he didn't know how to do anything else, just play sports. So he ended up working for a sports store, and he is basically a failed guy, a bitter. Well, it's not bitter yet. He will become bitter later.
He's basically the whole American boy.
Yeah, but starting to enter
exactly
the phase of
going nowhere.
Yeah, going nowhere. The Ron Taylor shows up in another scenario, which is the memorial. I don't think maybe you can see it here.
Yes.
It's the second. And when he shows up in this one, he's already a middle-aged guy, and well, we'll talk about that later. This just to tell you that even though the Giallos are a trilogy, the stories aren't really connected, but there are mentions. In this case, there are two characters. One of those is Ron Taylor. The other is a secondary character in the Orpheum Lofts. We'll get to that later. And they appear in both scenarios. Let's go on. Let's go on to Stephanie Armitage. Stephanie is a singer, a jazz singer, very seductive, very charming, very fashionable. She performs in a jazz bar in Tribeca near the Orpheum Lofts, which is called the Stardust Cafe. The Stardust Cafe is the place where these friends hang out and they meet the other friends who aren't living in the same building. So it's the place where you can gather them when they aren't in the building.
I don't like Stephanie. She looks too perfect.
Yeah, she looks too perfect.
All the guys like her, and the women, most of the women also like her too much. They should hate her.
Yeah, everybody likes her. Well, not everybody, most people.
Yes, Julia doesn't like her, but that's going into much details. Let's move on.
Carl, which wasn't mentioned yet, likes her a lot. But
Yes.
now there's Gregory. Gregory doesn't live in the building also, but he has his boyfriend. His boyfriend lives in the building too. His boyfriend is John Flint. Gregory is unlike the others, is a successful man. He's a literary critic for a magazine called City Life. He's an intellectual type, but he's not a bookworm. He's a dandy. He's a fashionable guy who has lots of important friends. Gregory is the guy you will probably be an NPC, I think, but if he's playing, he will be the guy who has important friends, and if you need some important people to tell your story, or maybe to investigate the building, looking for the supernatural events or whatever, is probably useful as an ally. Now, John Flint is Gregory's boyfriend, and is well, it's strange, not quite a boyfriend. They have a open relationship. John is a computer programmer. He doesn't really he wouldn't be the guy you would expect to be the Gregory Wiseman's relationship, but well, for some reason he likes him. John is a bit strange guy.
He doesn't like nobody, right? John doesn't like people very
Yes,
much.
not much. Yeah, he doesn't hang around with the others that much. But well, he's kind of an intellectual. He reads Poe and Baudelaire and likes Bauhaus and Sisters of Mercy. So well, he has some unusual tastes. Let's go on. Then Carl Hughes. Carl Hughes
Carl.
is a musician, a jazz musician. He also acts at the Stardust Cafe, but not only. Yes, he does gigs in other places.
And then we have a love triangle here, kind of, right?
Yes.
He had a relationship with Stephanie, but she ended it. Am I remembering it right?
Yeah, a quick relationship, nothing
yes,
much.
But he continued obsessed about her.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, he started dating Julia, and Julia is crazy in love with Carl, but of course he's still thinking about Stephanie.
Yeah, and he doesn't really like Julia. He's just using her trying to forget about the other one, or trying to move on with his life. But he treats her like garbage, and that creates a kind of a problem because most people like Julia, and most people don't like Carl. Carl was one of the player characters in the first time I played this scenario.
You made him nastier.
No, he was already supposed to be nasty,
okay.
because the player wanted to do a character he wasn't used to do, so the bad guy. So that's why he's like this.
So if you don't play Carl, it's a good suspect to be the murderer.
Yeah. Then there's Andrea Parker. Andrea Parker is a nice girl, a nice, elegant, attractive girl who works at the Stardust Cafe. She's a waitress. She has a cat called Lucy.
I was gonna say that's the most interesting thing about her.
Yeah, she isn't that interesting, but she's also a tough one, so
yes.
she can be the survivor if you are playing like a Giallo. Then we get to Andy Macduff. Andy Macduff was briefly mentioned before. He's the creepy janitor. He has some friends, but not that much. He's friendly with one.
George.
George, yeah, it's George. But he doesn't talk that much because he's creepy. Yeah, he has a daughter called Charlie Macduff. Charlie Macduff, if you are playing the kind of supernatural version, she can have some kind of powers. She sees dead people. So if you are accompanying this, you probably notice that there are lots of mentions to relationships, and well, that's the soap opera part of it. Soap opera / TV show. if you are playing it in that mode, you'll probably want to add those elements. If you don't like those elements, you can take them away because it can work without so much importance about who is fucking whom.
Yeah, there's a lot of fucking going on.
Now, yeah, probably this part here, the story seeds for the cast have some of those stories, but these ones are meant for the game master, of course, because they are story seeds. Now we're going to the supporting cast, and I'm just going to browse through this because this
Most of them are old people. The old people that
yeah,
live on
part
the
of them.
building.
So there's Joe Dobbs and Muriel Dobbs. This is the couple that owns the Stardust Cafe. They don't live in the building anymore, so that they aren't that important unless you are going to place a lot of scenes in the Stardust Cafe. Paul Abramovich, as I mentioned before, is the owner of the building. He has lived in the penthouse a long time ago. He doesn't live there anymore. He bought a bigger house. Then there's Dorothy McLean. Dorothy McLean is the other character that shows up in the memorial. She is I like this character.
I love this character, and I got to play her in the memorial.
Dorothy is inspired by two characters, or maybe three. One of them is what's her name? The Ray Bradbury character.
Constance Rettingen.
Constance Rettingen. She was a star, a movie star. Of course, the other character she is based on is the protagonist of what? I can't remember it.
I can't remember the name in English. That's the problem. I can't just remember the name in Portuguese. I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, Sunset Boulevard. So she's
Nora, isn't Nora Jones? No, not Nora Jones. That's a singer.
So no, never mind. That's not important. So she's inspired in two characters, in two fictional characters. Of course, the Norma, yeah.
Norma something, yes.
So Constance Rettingen and the main character in Sunset Boulevard. So they are fading stars from the golden age of Hollywood. She was a star during the times of the silent movies. When the talkies appeared, she didn't quite make the transition as she was before. She stopped being a star. She stopped getting the best roles, and she started subsisting from minor roles in the big movies or protagonist roles in probably exploitation or something like that. And then she tried a comeback in the Broadway, and that's why she moved to this building, to the Orpheum Lofts.
At the time was very fashionable.
Yeah, it was still fashionable. So she came there in the 60s, I think. So okay, so she has a passion for Ron Taylor, and
that's why they both appear in the memorial.
So let's give a little bit of the story. So eventually she gets what she wanted. He eventually starts having a relationship with the older woman. Okay, I've talked too much about her because she's our favorite character. Then we have a couple, James and Lucy Wayne. Is a wife beater. There's not much to say about them. She's extremely jealous, and she's a weak woman who can't abandon her husband. Then there's Buck and Elvira Claymore, typical working class couple, not really important here. They have a daughter. It's probably the most important thing here because Mandy Claymore is in love with Ron, and so this is another bit of information you can use for if you are playing the second mode. Then there's John Burton. He is a security officer and he is a ex-military.
Ex-military, he can be useful.
Yeah, is also as a rival if you want to, because most of the neighbors don't like him. He's a rough guy. Then there's Franklin and Rosie Hawkins. He's a sick old man, and she's a very active woman who is constantly snooping around the building. So of course she is useful. She's very useful indeed.
She knows everything. If you want to spread a rumor, you have Mrs. Hawkins there.
Then you have Louis Brown. Louis Brown is a black guy. a Jamaican man. He lives in the one of the top floors, I think, and
Most people also don't like him and think
yeah, they
they
think
sell
he's
drugs.
well.
And maybe he does.
At least he smokes some joints, so this is another thing that we must mention. This is supposed to be set in the middle 80s because it works better. Not only, well, it works better for both modes. For the Giallo mode, you can even set it in the 70s because it's the best time for Giallos.
Yes.
But for the other mode, it makes sense to be the 80s or the early 90s because there's a part of the sitcoms, and those sitcoms are 80s and 90s.
Yes. And it's always useful for terror because you have no
Yeah,
cell phones, you have no internet.
and no portable computers, and okay,
Exactly.
lots of things that are work better for horror in the 80s. Then there's Alice White. Alice White is a nutcase, a religious nutcase, and some people suspect or think she has a handicapped teenage son living with her, but nobody sees him. So yeah, she doesn't talk about it. She only talks about the gospel. So okay, she's the nutty lady. Then there's Benjamin Harker. He was once a history professor at Columbia. He retired due to a breakdown some years ago. Now he's an old man. He has lived in the Orpheum Lofts since the 40s, and he knows almost everybody. He likes to talk about things, varied subjects. He's an intellectual, of course, and well, it's obviously useful if you are going to involve this with supernatural.
Yes, if you're going to study the story of the building and the supernatural, he can be your librarian.
Then there's the mystery tenant. The mystery tenant is someone who nobody knows his name, and he rented the flat about 2 years ago. He always wears a black Macintosh, a hat, and sunglasses. No one has seen his face yet. So he could be either the assassin or a red herring, because he's, well, probably a red herring because it's too obvious. Or else, who knows? He may be the killer. Jane Norris. Jane Norris is a nice, friendly old lady who I think is an old friend of the professor.
I
Maybe
think she's
more.
an old friend of maybe
Yeah,
more, yes. But I
yes.
was thinking that everybody likes Jane because she's
Yeah.
old and sweet.
And she is a nice victim because if you kill her, she probably will be missed. Then there's officers Black and Blue. If you are wondering why there are so many people with color names, that's because there's another inspiration for this, which is a Paul Auster book, the New York trilogy. That's why there are black, blue, brown, and white. So the officers Black and Blue. One of them is very friendly and seductive. The other one is also very friendly, but not as
They patrol the neighborhood,
yeah.
so they're well known to the building, people that live in the building.
I don't think I need to tell you why they are useful. They are cops. So then there's Felicia and Bobby Miles. Um, Felicia and Bobby Miles are another couple who isn't very relevant here. Then there's Sherry and Clayton Cox. Sherry and Clayton Cox are punks. They are punks because this is the 80s. They aren't really liked by everybody else. She's an aspiring artist, and he's a musician for the cunts. So that's why they are disliked. They are cunts. Okay, I shouldn't be saying this word, I think, but no.
I don't know. Yeah, will YouTube does YouTube censor curse words?
I don't know. Who cares? Okay, so you have
No, we said fuck before
yeah.
and nothing happened.
So there are some more story seeds for the supporting cast, especially for Dorothy McLean. She's always a star, and some more story seeds random here, random story seeds, and the back cover, which isn't that much interesting. So okay, let's stop sharing this.
I think it's time for me to mention that this month is the anniversary, right, of the Red Room. or since you decided to publish your scenarios.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Some people know the story, but for those who don't,
I'm going to bore people a little bit more. So about a year ago, I had, well, a little more than a year ago, I decided to translate, during lockdown, of course, I decided to translate an old scenario I had, which is called, of course, Orpheum Lofts, and which was written for Cult, the role-playing game, the first edition. And then when I finished translating it, I was planning, I did an ugly layout, which included,
this was the cover,
yeah,
or the cover picture.
the picture wasn't ugly, but the layout was, well, it wasn't actually a layout. I did it on Word, so it wasn't a layout, a proper one at least. But then I decided to post on a group, a Facebook group, and asking for suggestions or recommendations about what I should do with that. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to put this on drive-through as a free or a pay what you want file. But then some guy called James Desborough answered, and well, we had a brief chat, and I asked, well, if you want to well, I said, you can do this, you can do that, or you can just send this to someone who has already published stuff and ask for an opinion. And so I asked for his, and well, you know, next
Yeah, that was the beginning
of a beautiful
partnership.
friendship. So that's it. After this one came the memorial, which will be the next self-promotion bit. Do you want to say something else about Orpheum Lofts?
Maybe about a little bit about our experience playing Orpheum Loft. So we tried it with a small group and just the two of us, so just one player, and we can say that it works very well for a solo player, because that was a problem that we had in the past. We didn't have a group and during periods, and finding things that worked well just with one person was really hard. So we can say that this one, if you happen to be in that situation, this one worked out very well.
That's not actually a solo. Solo is if you play really alone.
Yes, exactly.
So it's
exactly. It's
one-on-one or
yes,
something like that.
A one-on-one, exactly. A one-on-one. It also works well for two. I don't think we ever tried it with three people. I think with too many people, it would probably become too complicated.
But it depends on the game master and the groups. There are people.
But it's really good to play one shots. It's perfect, and you can play, and it's always a different story.
So as I said, if you want to try it, you can try the free scenario. And if you want to see actual reviews, I will link them below too. Some people reviewing this scenario. There was a few reviews already. Okay, I think this is enough. I've promoted myself and the Orpheum Lofts. So see you soon. With some review, some real review or an interview. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and share if you like it. Bye.
Even if you don't like it.